Hello, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Dr. Stuart Currie, and it gives me great pleasure to be invited by TGfU SIG to present at their 40th anniversary. My partner in this presentation, in this project, was Dr. Ajit Korgaokar from Tennessee Tech University. Dr. Korgaokar will not be presenting today, but just want to recognize Dr. Korgaokar for his contributions to the project. So today's presentation is looking at implementing a game-based approach GBA methods course for a United States physical education teacher education program. I'm a professor within the program. I've been teaching for the past 11 years, and I really value GBA in terms of helping our candidates. Presentation objectives. This was a preliminary self-study, really looking to explain the why and how a GBA course was organized and delivered over a 15-week university semester. Explain how PEAT faculty can effectively teach GBA by discussing the course organization, providing you with resources for course implementation consideration, and then discuss quantitative and qualitative PEAT candidate data results from a survey that surveyed our candidates, and then continue, obviously, to advocate for GBA in PEAT. Brief GBA overview. We know that GBA is an effective teaching pedagogical approach that facilitates teaching games and sports, as well as coaching education within and across the games categories such as target, net wall, striking, fielding, and invasion. It's considered to be learner-centered. We use modified games to develop successful game players. Reputable game-based approaches over the past 40 years have positively impacted physical education and sport pedagogy. The original approach model was developed by Bunker and Thorpe back in 1982, teaching games for understanding. Back in the 1990s, we then moved towards game sense, play practice, tactical games model, and more recently, developed by the U.S. Soccer Federation's developmental model, the play practice play approach. Teaching physical education using game-based approaches, according to the literature, can be challenging and complex for pre-service candidates who tend to be a little bit more familiar and comfortable with a teacher-centered, traditional, technical, skill-based approach or skill-themed approach. Pre-service candidates' challenges, again, according to the literature, includes lack of content and pedagogical knowledge, planning skills, the ability to design appropriate games that will challenge students both technically and tactically, developing higher order thinking questions, and then lack of teaching resources, and then actually lack of the ability to observe this approach being applied within teaching. We believe that including a game-based approach methods course in a university physical education teacher education program introduces pre-service candidates to the content pedagogical knowledge required to teach games and sports within and across the game categories prior to becoming an in-service professional teacher. So this is prior to them getting certified and teaching full-time in schools. So PEAT, what is PEAT? Within the US, higher education programs that prepare and certify students for physical education within the pre-K through 12 setting. Internationally, and I hope we have a lot of international attendees at the conference, they're referred to as your pre-service teachers. PEAT programs engage candidates in planning, designing, and implementing GBAs. We introduced the course back in 2014 into our program to best prepare PEAT candidates to teach GBAs. Brief course description for the course. It introduces instructional models specifically developed for teaching secondary physical education. There's an emphasis on planning and applying developmentally appropriate physical education models. And then GBAs will be investigated along with the concepts and the tactics of teaching games. So the course itself was taught by me in the fall of 2022. We had 14 undergraduate physical education, teacher education candidates. Of the 14, we had 10 males and 4 females. Candidates had no prior knowledge of GBA. In fact, their experience of models of physical education tended to be more traditional. This was a 15-week course, and I designed the course. So I really delved deeply into what would be the best way to go about teaching it, and some of the assignments that would really help develop the candidates' content and pedagogical knowledge. So I did provide a teaching demonstration, started off with target games. So I demonstrated a GBA target game lesson. Following the lesson, we then met back in the classroom and reflected upon the lesson. What were the strengths, what were some of the weaknesses, areas for improvements. We then moved into striking fielding, again, reflected back on the experience, net wall, and then finally invasion games. So we covered, and I provided the students with an example of each game category. Following the teaching experience, we then provided them with an opportunity to develop their content knowledge. So students then had to search the databases and find peer-reviewed journals on game-based approaches. The students then led a discussion on their article, and then we reflected as an entire group. We know the importance of lesson planning. So within this course, they had a lesson planning assignment. And then once they developed the lesson plan, they then taught the lesson plan to their peers. And again, we know what the importance is in terms of reflection. So again, we included a reflection piece. Also, we thought it was going to be important that the students actually participated as students in the lesson. We then assigned them a game-based approach presentation. So again, delving into the databases, finding the latest information from peer-reviewed journal on game-based approaches. And then as a summative assessment, we had them complete a final comprehensive exam. Assessments of and for learning included quizzes, article reviews and discussions, lesson plan, peer teaching, presentations, and their final comprehensive exam. Data were gathered from a student survey. It was a 5-point Likert scoring scale with 1 open-ended question. So there were 10 questions that students had to respond to at the end of the course and following the posting of their grade. And as you can see down the left-hand side, these are the 6 questions that discussed how helpful were the assignments. So how helpful were the article quizzes, article reviews and discussions? How helpful was the GBA lesson plan, the student peer teaching experience, the game-based approach presentation, and then the final comprehensive exam? And as you can see on the right-hand side here, it was categorized according to somewhat not helpful, neither helpful nor unhelpful, somewhat helpful, and very helpful. And it's great to see that according to the questions and according to the assignments were very well received in terms of the quizzes, in terms of the article reviews, in terms of the lesson plan, student teaching experience, the presentation, and then the final comprehensive exam. Unfortunately, the final comprehensive exam wasn't considered to be very helpful, so that's interesting to note. Then we move into the students' comfort level. So how comfortable were you with designing tactical games, your tactical understanding of games, asking students questions during the teaching assignment, and then assessing student learning during your teaching assignment as well. And as you can see here, this is where we start to see the students becoming less comfortable with some of the points that have been identified in literature. So not as comfortable in regards to designing tactical games, tactical understanding, asking questions, and then assessing students. So of the 14 students, 57% of the candidates completed the 10-question reflective survey. Then we moved into the open-ended question. So at the end of the 10-question survey, students had an opportunity to provide their opinion on the game-based approach as well as the course. As you can see here, 50% of the candidates responded. So each of these direct quotes comes from the individual student. Unfortunately, we don't have time to read all this, but there's some really strong positive takeaways. Let's take, for example, point one, really positive teaching method for physical education. Great method that encourages, motivates students and keeps them active. Great approach to teaching in secondary level. Appropriate way to play games due to the fact they are modified and exaggerated, but also representative of the full version of the game. So this student here obviously saw the positivity of the game-based approach, but has also applied some of the key principles of GBA. It's a modified, it's an exaggerated game, but it truly is representative of the full version. After seeing GBA used with actual students, so this course is taught in the same semester as students go out into their final field experience. So this is what the student is talking about. They use this approach actually out in the school systems. It made it more understandable. I felt like I had a better grasp of how it works in the classroom setting. Excellent approach, and it's exactly what I want to use in future physical education teaching. Allows the students to be involved, and it helps the classroom management and participation and motivation. I would recommend the GBA. However, there is a lot of room for error if the teacher is not comfortable asking questions or doesn't know the material. So that then goes back to that content, the importance of developing the content knowledge for best teaching practices. Important to note here, this was a document that's only just been published by Shape America, which is our national organization. And it's really advocating for using the teaching games for understanding approach, or now as we know it, the game-based approach within physical education, teacher education programs. So teaching candidates use a variety of instructional models, one being TGfU or game-based approach. Teaching candidates engage in peer teaching experiences using TGfU, game-based approach, and then provides an introduction to various instructional models. And that's what we think this course has been able to do. It provides our students with a slightly different approach for teaching physical education. So again, unfortunately, only limited to 10 minutes, but some real key takeaways. The data does identify a positive candidate response to the GBA course, but also recognizes some GBA challenges, and I'll take those challenges into consideration as I reflect back on the course in the spring before teaching it again in the fall. Course assignments develop candidate content, pedagogical knowledge, helping bridge the gap from theory to application. So again, just making sure that students have the content so they can apply best teaching practices. Candidate expressed a positive attitude towards a methodological change in their teaching. And then PSCs indicated teaching using this game-based approach in service when they get certified in their future teaching careers. And that's great to read. And then ultimately, we believe this course has been effective, and PEAT faculty can teach a game-based approach to pre-service candidates. And then ultimately, we do still need further investigation into PEAT, into game-based approaches, into best teaching practices, but also further investigation into PEAT faculty, how they teach, how they organize, and how they deliver the game-based approach experience. These are the references. And then finally, we'd like to thank my co-professor in terms of this project, Dr. Ajit Korgaokar. We'd like to thank TGfU once again for inviting us to present. And please, if you do have any follow-up questions or have additional comments, please contact me via email at scurry1@utm.edu. Have a fantastic conference, and thanks for attending. I hope you found this helpful.